I began my association with the School of Music officially in the year 2001. I was working for Larry Sitzky as a research assistant on one of his ARC projects on piano music. The supervisor I was working for was Dr. Ruth Lee Martin, and she was also a musical colleague, and we were performing together as well. And really, through her inspiration, I started to think about doing a doctorate in Australian women's folk music, because if you ask anybody what Australian folk music is, they usually say beards and bottle tops. But in fact, of course, as we know, there were lots of women in Australian music from the days predating white settlement and from then on. So I think in 2002 I started my doctorate, yes, and Stephen Wild became my principal supervisor, and I applied the principles of ethnomusicology to that research into Australian women, because even though it's English-speaking music and it's something that we're very familiar with, you can apply principles of ethnomusicology to the study of that kind of traditional music. Definitions of what is tradition were very important, what represents ritual. So those kind of principles were very useful for interrogating my topic. After I completed the doctorate, I worked again for Larry Sitzky on another ARC project, which was the role of the piano in Australian cultural history. And I found that there was room to continue my research, looking specifically at the piano and looking specifically at Australian women during the period in the early part of the 20th century. It's often called the long 19th century. But I found two sisters who grew up in remote, rural, northern New South Wales, but who made careers for themselves in London. They won scholarships to the Royal College of Music, and they went over, arrived in 1914, right in time for the First World War, but they made virtue of necessity, as they say, and they used their timing very well to make successful careers for themselves, because the positive side of all the conflict and the fact that men were being recruited in their thousands to go to the battlefields, that meant that for women musicians there were great career opportunities. The pay was excellent, and you could actually make a good living as a musician in that era in England, and as I've discovered recently in Australia as well. That strand of research has carried on and is still something that I'm pursuing. I'm giving a talk up in Lismore, the Historical Society, at the end of May about the two sisters who came from that region. Also in my work at the National Film and Sound Archive, recently a wonderful collection has come our way from a young woman exactly in that time period called Edna Mary Bridget Lear. I'll hold that up for people to see. She was a fine violinist and a pianist. In fact, she was a multi-instrumentalist. The music collection that we've taken possession of demonstrates her facility across a number of instruments, including the banjo and the mandolin. She was multi-talented and multi-pronged in her career during this time. She performed at night in secret under an alias as a jazz musician, because it was very well paid. She had a teaching position in a quite established conservative academy of music during the day, and I think she took in private music students as well. She had married in 1914. Her husband had gone to war immediately, so she was left to support herself. So music was the way she survived the First World War, and I think looking at the photographs of her, she had a very good time. Wonderful woman, I think. Stephen Wild kind of facilitating a group of his students going to our first international conference in New Zealand, which was a joint conference of MSA and the New Zealand equivalent of that society. So Stephen knows how to have fun, as well as being a great academic mentor and extending networks to his students. So that was a really wonderful experience. As a PhD student, you have a very narrow territory you're navigating, but to be around like-minded people who are willing to try and understand what you're getting at and support that, that's excellent. And the group of friends, the cohort that were here during my PhD, so Dr. Kate Bowen, who is teaching here now, Dr. Alistair Noble, who was a staff member here. They were two of my really good friends and made it possible to complete the PhD through their interest, their discussion and their friendship, and those sorts of bonds that are based on kind of intellectual respect as well as, you know, genuine friendship, something that you carry with you and kind of help you through your career.